Okay, so create a new form. This would be again the Windows Forms app.net, and I'm going to call this the main form. Okay, that's the name of the main form. The solution could be different, but we just call it the same as it is in a way. Well, we just call it main program. Main program, but the form is called the main form. All right, so back to our typical form. So the form is always defaulted to form 1. I'm going to change this to a different name, and well, it's called main form. That's the project name, but the form name here is called form 1 in the program here. I call form 1. Click on it. I'm going to change the name to something more meaningful. If you click on the alphabetical listing here, so the main it's called form 1. We don't want that. We'll call it main form. Okay, so main. Well, you can go like FRM for form, the main form, and then we'll just leave it at that. Well, the default location down here, start position, I'm going to change that to the center, so it'll be like center screen if we want that. Okay, so and then I'm going to create in here. So we'll treat this like the main menu. Okay, for those who will create your main menu, we'll just say this is the main menu, and it's going to link to one of those forms. So we'll put a link in here, a button, and let's just say that this button goes to the main, the options. Okay, so I'll go here again to the text. I'll change this to options, and we'll leave that as the text. I'm going to go change the name to BTN options. That is going to create an object. I'm going to load that function. I'll just change the font really quick to something big. Again, 25 or 20. Okay, so that's our options menu, and we have the credit screen and things like that, right? Okay, so when we create the game, so this is the main screen or the main game. Now, when I double click this form here, the option here, double click that, what I want to do is I want to load another form, which is called the options form. Okay, so what we need to do over here on the Solution Explorer is to create another form. Now we have one called form 1. You can rename it to, a main if you want, like main form. Okay, we changed it to called main form, and then we'll have another one. So if you click on the main program here, okay, right click on that, just go to add a new form right here, which is a Windows form. If you don't see that here, you can go to the new item and choose a Windows form, but usually it would be here. Okay, Windows form, and make sure it's the Windows form that we need, the same type. Then the name for this form would be we call it options form. Okay, options form. So now I have another one called options form.cs. So this is the form they want to create those volume control. All right. So on this screen, when I load, you see something here. I'm going to put something here so we know what this form is. So again, the same convention, right? You click on the form, go over here, and you give it a name. It's called options form, which is okay, but I want to put a FRM in front. Okay, so the prefix FRM for forms, and then you can keep the rest as is. And I'm going to go here and add a really quick message just to show us this is the you know what? Maybe we can add those two sliders. Okay, so those sliders are called a tracker. Under the Windows Forms, you click that, you scroll all the way down here. You should see like track bar or something. Yeah, the track bar. You drag that here, and then we'll make this kind of big like that. Okay, and so when you use the track bar, you control this setting. This is a minimum volume, number to a maximum, and I think by default it's just set to 10. So if you click on it, You can give it a name as well, another object, right? So you can say TRK for track. And we'll call this one here like the BG volume, the background. And so if I scroll down here, you see there's a minimum and maximum. So the maximum is 10. So this will be like, it has a little marker here, you can't see it, but it's a little marker for 1 to 10. If you want the number to be a little bit more, smoother, you can put that to like 100 or like 25 or something like that. Let's just say I just put 20 for now, okay? The minimum is 0, the maximum is 20, so you have 20 bars here. And so that is the volume control for the background. And then I'll do another one. Maybe this is for the sound effects. So I'll go back here again, TRK, SFX. What I call the other one? BG volume. Maybe this is like SFX volume. Okay, so it has meaningful names. Okay, so now they're defaulted to 0 and 0. So we know this is the form that we want to load when I open the other program. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to the other one, the main form over here. When I click on this option, it's going to go inside here in the program, and I'm going to load that form. It's called main options form. What you need to do is inside the button here, we need to create an object of that form. Okay, so this is this is how you do it, and we haven't an object yet. I'll teach you. So we need to notice how we did like int n is equal to 12 like that, right? This is the data type. It's called integer, and the variable equal to something. Okay, we do something very similar here for objects. Instead of say int something, we're going to say the form is called options form. You can see that it's available here. Options, I think I call it the FRM options form, right? Options form, that is the data type. We'll call it maybe OM for options menu equal to new FRM options form. Okay, this is how you create a new instance of that form, and it will follow the same pattern. When you create your loading screen, create your quest 1 or quest 2, your actual game, you do exactly the same. You say level 1, L1 equal to new level 1. Okay. So once I create that object, I can then now open that when I click this button. And you do that by using this object om.show. Okay, call the show function, and then it's a function, so you do that. And that's it. Now you load that function at the menu in your program. So I'm going to show you, save that now, and then I'm going to go ahead and run it. So here's our main form. When I click options, it loads the new screen, right, based on the size that I designed over there. And I can use these sliders here. I can control the sliders. So this is the main volume control for our background music. This is for our sound effects. So they have their own separate channels. And when we create sound effects, we want to map the volume to the correct channel here. Okay. So then when I do my settings here, when I'm done, I should close that. Or usually we don't want to put that X here. Maybe we have a button here or something to say go back to the main menu. Okay. But notice that I can move it around. I can also go back to the main menu, and this is something we may not want. We want to say when you open that form, it should stay active until you close that out, right? And we don't want to switch back and forth here. This is not good. And because when I do this, if I open again, you see I have another copy, right? And the settings don't match. They're completely independent. Okay, we don't want that. We just want a one form when we load. And then when we close it, whatever we set here, we should retain these volume controls. Otherwise, it wouldn't work, right? So we can close that, and then back here again. When I open it, it should retain the setting as I had before. Okay, so there is a way how you can actually transfer data from one form to another form. Okay, so at least we know that that's how you open new forms. Okay, now the reason why I have duplicate forms when I click the button many times, because every time I click it, it creates a new copy of that one. And this is not what we want. What we want is just one copy. So instead of putting this inside here in the local function, we put that outside in the global space. Okay, that means outside of your function. That means I'm going to cut this out, and I'll put the very top of the program right up here in the class section above the form up here. So I put it in the global space. So now it's unique. So when you create your scene, you can have one up here as well for your credit screen, loading screen, the quest 1 and quest 2. They're going to be all in the global space here. So that now when I run it, you see that you don't have duplicates. I have this one copy. If I keep it active, if I keep doing that, I won't get any more copy because that is already existing. So therefore, it's not going to create any new ones. Okay, and that's what we want. All right. So put that outside in global space. And then now when I turn open, so notice when I close it, I open it again. It says it doesn't exist anymore. Right? Cannot access because it doesn't exist. And the reason why is when you close that form, when you X out, you actually destroy that form. It no longer exists. So what you do is usually you will go back and then recreate this again. Okay, so that means I could go and then just put OM down here and reinstantiate again after I close that. And I'll show you a different way, but this is good for now. So once I close it, once you close it, it destroys that object. And then I'll recreate it again down here. Okay, so it doesn't have the error. And so when you run it again, if I go ahead and click on the options, I have a new copy. If I close it, I can reopen it again. Okay? So now the thing is, how do you retain this data? When it's set to like the mid halfway point here, and I close it, I come back, that should stay as it was. Okay? So let's do that. So now, when we create our form, this is the main program, again, up here in the global space, you want to put those in the global space where we control those volumes. So here we have like global volumes. And we'll create two variables if you want to. And we learned about arrays last week and this week, right? So you can use arrays for that. An array of, let's just say, a public, we'll make this static, okay, public static, and it's an array of integer because we control volumes based on numbers, if you remember that. We call this one here, I put G for global, and then underscore volumes, I guess. We'll put G for global, okay, if you use that. And then it's an array of just two channels. One is for, let's just say we set the default to a level of 5. That is the background, and this is the sound effect. So both will have the same settings. When we initialize the game, it's going to set to that volume based on this G volume control here. Okay, so notice I set this to a public variable. That means that this form over here can access it from this different form. If you don't do that, I cannot access this data. And so when I load this form, when I click show, it's going to load that form over here. And then I'm going to double click this form here. You see that it has created a function called load. When I load the form, I do a couple of things. Well, when I create this form, when I create a new form like right here, I want to say OM's got a new form here. What this does is it's going to go over here to this form and call this function here. And I initialize it here. Okay? And then when I click the button to show the form instead, it's going to call the show. And then now it will load this form, not through here, but through this load function down here. Okay, so I have two places. This only runs once. This runs every time when you show the form. Okay, so when we run it one time for the very first time, we want to set the volume control here, not 0, but based on what we set over here in the global space, right? We want to set to 5 and 5. Okay, and so we're going to access this data called G volumes from the form called main form. Okay, so over here then in the code on this side, when I initialize it, I'm going to, instead of putting right in here, I'm going to create a function down here. And we learned to create function before. We can make this private. It's going to be a type void, and I'll just call it set volumes. Okay, and then I will also create a global variable here for us to use. Well, we don't have to. Yeah, I think that's fine. So in here, we're gonna set the volume. The volume is going to be, remember in our form we have the BG volume control, and then the sound effects volume control, right? So I'm going to say the BG, TRK BG volume, and it takes the value property. So dot value is equal to the value from this variable. The first value is the volume, so it'll be G volumes of 0. All right. So it's coming from the form called main form. Dot, and then you have the G volume. There's the G volumes here, and index 0. This is the volume control. Okay, and you do the same for the other one. So TRK sound effects volume dot value is going to be set to form main dot G volume of 1. So now we have the settings to those two when we run it. And you'll see that if I save it now, and if I run the program, hopefully this works, right? Okay, it did not set that to the volume yet. I think I didn't do something correctly here. Okay, so that's, but at least that's what we want to do. We want to set that to the volume set on from this form here. Oh yeah, because I didn't call it, right? It's a function. You have to call it. So that means when I initialize it, right here, I have to call it. Actually, I don't have to call it here. I call it when I load the form. So if I go to when I load the form, when I load it, I'm gonna call it set volumes. Oops, not set margins. Set volumes. I call the function. Every time when I load it, it's gonna set the function. Call the function and then set the settings here. So again, try again. So when I load it, right, notice the settings are now set to 5 because those are default settings, right? I could change it back to whatever a different volume. I come back, it's going to go back to 5. And the reason is because I did not alter the setting in the main program. So when I make some changes here, I have to update the G volumes array. Okay, so that's the next thing you want to do. So I got it. So when I load, it loads from that volume, but from here. And there's another option, another function called when we close the box, right? We close that. If you go over here to the design, right here, go to, so every form has this, the lightning bolt. Okay, if you see that there's a load property, there is a function called closing right here. Form closing. You need to turn that on, and you don't have any function yet, so you can create one. Okay, and I'll give you the code next time, but it will look something very similar to this one here. And I'm just going to copy this function and put it right below it, and we'll call this one here not load, but we call it form closing. Okay, and you can call it whatever you want, doesn't matter really. What's important is this arguments here. This have to say form closing arguments. Form closing arguments right here. We just changed that to that instead of the event arguments, and then we're set. So now when we close it, we want to change this data to the current state of this data. Okay, so I'm going to say before I close it, I'm not going to set the volume. I'm going to set the form main called the G volume of 0. This is the background data equals to this volume now because I might have changed that slider, right? And you do the same thing for the other ones. Just copy that put it here, and this is the index of 1. I'm going to track the sound effects volume and put it here. Okay, and then the form closes after that. But before I close that, I already captured the current value. And then now I set the G volume to that. So when I open the form again, I call the set volume, and it's going to set to what I had initially in the previous form, right? So this is a very common feature in passing data from one to another. So now this function is available. So if you go back to design, back to your settings over here, and under the lightning bolt on the form, I can now choose for the form closing option here. And the drop down, there should be one that says, form closing. Oops. Well, I could do that too. I should just have done that. But I'm gonna copy this and put it down here. Okay, I'll just delete the one that I created. It's easier that way. It's already added for us, so that's good. Okay, so now in the properties, you see that now it's linked to that function that we had called form closing here. All right. So when I close this form, it's gonna save the data G volume 1 and volume 2 in the main form here. Now these data are updated to a new data, and when I reopen that form again, it's going to retain that state. Okay, so hopefully this works. Let's go and run this now. Here's my default is 5. I'm going to change this to say the maximum of that. I close it, I come back, and you see that it's now retained. Okay, so the form is now active, and so this will be your global volume. So if it's too loud or too soft, we can change this by going to the options menu, and then we set these two data. They will stay like that until we go back and modify it. All right, so that's how you pass data, folks, between one form to another form. And so it's the same format when you create another menu to start the game. We have a function here called start game, and then we have start game.show. Okay. So now again, when I run this, notice when I click option, I can move this around. I can I'll have one copy. I'll have another copy again, which I don't want. I didn't want that. But notice again, I don't want to go back and forth between the two forms. This should stay active until I finish my settings here, right? And so to do that, instead of saying show, we're going to call a function called show dialog instead of show. This is called what's called a modal form. Modal form means only one form is active at any given time. You cannot have two active forms at the same time. I mean, you cannot access two forms, I should say. The previous one, I can switch back and forth. If you change to the show dialog, if I'm not mistaken, you should now have access only to this form. Notice I cannot go back to the other form. Okay, and this is what we want. We want to do everything here until we X out of this one here. So we kind of prevent the option of recreating so many copies of the form. So only one can exist at any given time. And so when we're done, we're happy with what we have, you can close that, and then now back to the main form. And then when I open that again, everything is set as before. Okay? And if you don't want this X here, because it's too window style, right? It doesn't look like a game screen. Usually, you want to create so that you have your own buttons, right? Your own design. And so I could have like, if I go to something really quick here, my toolbox is gone. So you should have your own button here, and it will say, back to main menu when we're done, right? And I'll show really quick here. So I'm going to say back to main. And then we're going to go over here, I'll change this to btn back to main. Okay? And we'll change the font size to another really large size, 25, maybe 20, this one. So back to main when we are done with the settings. Okay, so now when I click this button here, okay, so all I'm doing is how do you get back to main? Well, we don't want to do this. We don't want to go in form and then that open or show. We don't want to do that. Because if you do that, you go in a circle here, right? You keep opening again and again in so many copies. We don't want that. We want to close this options form. So that is very easy to do. You just call this function called this dot close. That's it. Okay? You're closing the current form. So you exit out. Same as you click on the X and the box. So that will close this form, and then we're done. And then I don't want to show these, icons up here either. So you can turn those off by going to. Let me make it a little bit smaller. It's kind of big. I'll make it like just small like that, right? And then maybe it's good enough. Put it here. There you go. You can put messages, some labels over here, so background and so on. So if you click on the form, there should be an option here to say control. The control box here. This is the control box for these up here. You can just turn that off, make that false. And you see that now they're gone. Okay. You can even change so that you don't have any of these labels around here, just a plain box. But this is good enough for now. And so I can make this a little bit small if I want to, and put some information here as well. Save that, and when you run it now, it looks much nicer, right? So now I cannot close it until I click this button. So I have control of my buttons. Okay, and then I close that, go back to the main, and then my option is still maintained as before. Okay, so that's how you do with these forms. So make sure you do remove these buttons up here if you don't need them, and create your own. And when you close it, just dot close. This dot close, and that should close the form. So I hope this is helpful when you create form. Notice when I close it, I recreate it again, right? Even though I don't need it, it's recreated again, which is okay. But sometimes it's not okay if you have a lot of forms, because when I don't need it, I don't need it. So I only need it when I need it, right? That means when you load the form, when you're clicking the button to show the dialog, you will create this only if it's not already created. So you could do that, or you can say like if om yeah, I'll show next time. You can check so that if it's not already set, maybe not null. I think if om is not null or something, and then you can check it. But otherwise, obviously it's a pretty small game, so we should be fine. You can do that here, or you can open it. You can do it so when you can create that first if you want. That's fine too, I guess. So instead of put that here, I would just close that up here. I don't instantiate that at all, right? Just a placeholder, and leave that as available. When I need it, I can go ahead and create that down here. Okay, so when I close it, it's gone. So it doesn't use memory. Basically, that's what I'm trying to do here. So when I need it, I open that, make some changes, and I retain my data already. When I close it, it's gone. But when I go back, data is retained. Okay, so if you do just that little rotation here, makes it code so different. Okay, because it occurs in sequential order. So I prefer doing this way. And so that is that. And notice that I have two forms, right? And it loads the correct form, which is the main form. How does it know that? Why can't I start from this form? Because this is open, but when I run it, it always loads the main form. Okay? So and there's a way to change that if you want to. I mean, not in this game, we'll load the main form, but if you want to load a different form, you have to modify the program file here. Okay, this file controls everything, which form should load first. And in here somewhere, you see that there is a application run, it runs the form called form main form. That's why it's loading that form first. Okay. If I change that to form options, now that is my main entry form. So when I run the program, you see that it loads this option instead, right? So you can pick and choose between which form should load first in the program, and that's where you make the changes. It's a little bit different in Visual Basic. It's the same, but Visual Basic gives you a GUI interface where you just click and select which form, but I think C# doesn't have that. So that is where that form is being loaded every time. And again, don't change in here, okay? If you change it here, make sure it also matches the name of your form. So form main form, that's this form here, the variable we called it form main form. Okay, you change here, it changes it automatically. If I put like xy, if I go back to that program, you see that it changes to xy automatically. Okay, so this file, if you don't have to, don't touch it. Just don't, because it's maintained by the studio. Okay, so there you go. And so when you load your form, this is the forms. You have the initializer. That is run when I first run the new forms here. Every time we do a new form option, a new credits form or whatever it is, it's gonna always run this similar form, this file here. This is called a constructor function. It loads the form, creates the form, initializes it if there's anything to initialize. Okay, and so for this form, you could have your own data here as well. Here I don't have any local data here besides this one here, but you could have your own data here. This is really simple. So when you create the game, like your Quest 1, you're going to create a lot of variables here to track the progress of your game. And anything that needs to be passed over to the main form, well, you have to access through the main form G here, right? So like in the main program, eventually we're going to have a lot of one here. So this is for that one. We're going to have one for our hero. Like right down here, you have like a hero controls or whatever they are, right? I might have one that we will have one, right? For say public here, public static. We'll make it static. An integer for HP. Right? HP, and we'll make that 100 for now. Okay, so if you want to access this HP, and it's global, so again we put the G underscore HP, so we know it's global. Then we go to the form over here, and when something happens to our character, then you can change that. When I set the volume, maybe I got hit, and then we'll say form main, the HP, GHP, is now set to whatever it was, or right, if we lost HP, minus equal, let's just say 10. Now we lost 10. Okay, if we found a potion of some sort and we consume that, then maybe the potion have a size of 10 HP, we say plus HP of 10, and that would set the volume or the HP variable back in the global space, so that anywhere you game, you can always access these and change them, and it will affect the global variable for the game. Okay, same thing with others. But when you create your own monsters in your form, because when you do that in your local form, those monsters will be just local to this form here. So they are not going to be in the global, and they can be. You can put in the global space you want, but we're not going to access those from the main game, right? When we come back, we just load our monsters here, create our monsters, and they have their own HP levels for those here, and it's only local to that level. Okay, it's just that when we make changes, if you want to store this is like something I think we're not gonna do. Like when you play halfway through and suddenly your character dies, right? If you want to restart where you left off, that is a little bit challenging. So I'm not gonna hold you to do that. If you want to try it out, maybe you can. But to do that, you have to retain all these states, meaning the current level, where they're at, the location where you're at, what's been finished already, what's not. And it's a little bit hard to do that if you don't have databases. Okay, we haven't no databases yet, so we're not going to do that for now. So when we die, our character die, we just start back again from the town and then install over again. And so don't make it too long that we can't finish it. I mentioned last time also about the difficulty level, right? We could add another control here for the difficulty level on the game. So we'll set a difficulty based on the number here. You can have like easy, normal, hard. Set a default values to those. When we set our game, again here we have another global here, difficulty level. It will be here again, public, static, int g level. You call different one if you want. Well, just say default is going to be I don't know, we call it normal or something, right? So we could set a number. Let's just say that between if it's a 1, it's normal. We can decide that, right? So we say 1 is normal, and then 0 is easy, and then 2 is hard. Something like that, right? It doesn't matter what the number is. It could be anything here, and we can set the default to be level 1 for normal. And when you make some changes, same thing. In the options, you will modify this to either 1, 0, or 2. And then when you load your game, you need to check this G level and multiply that by your settings. So when you run the game, up in the global space somewhere, you can set a int difficulty level is equal to the form main dot G level plus whatever the setting may be. If you set that to be, let's say, a I don't know, let's just say a 5. That is your default level. But then if it's normal, then it'll be just 5. If it's, it'll be a 6. If it's easy, it'll be a 5. And then if it's hard, it'll be a 7, something like that. Okay? It's based on this global settings. And that determines the difficulty level of your monsters. And then your monster's HP will be the default HP times whatever this number is, right? And so that if you change the global level, this will change. And that makes it a little bit harder for our monster to be killed. Okay? And so that's for monsters. If you are, say, you build a puzzle or a little task, something for the hero to solve, and usually you probably want to give it a time. Just say you give like 2 minutes to solve something. And you can set a timer as well, based on the number in milliseconds, and then you can multiply that based on the G level difficulty, right? Same thing. The time will be remain based on the level. So normally just say you give it 2 minutes for a normal. If it's easy, you multiply that because by a different number. In that case, 0 wouldn't work because it makes that 0, right? It'd be 1, 2, or 3 maybe. So maybe like 1, 2, or 3. So let's say normal is level 2. So if it's easy, then time will be G global times 2 milliseconds. If it's so whatever that is, it's going to affect the overall speed or time. Okay, and you just make that a little bit harder for the player, for your own scene. Okay, so I hope this kind of gives you an idea of how you can now kind of start building your form. And don't worry when you do your own form and for your own team. You're not going to have, so you don't have access to the main form yet. And I will make this available once I receive your work by tomorrow, for example, or as soon as you have them. And I will create a main program like this, and I'll share it with everybody. And you can download it to your machine, and you can test it out. And so when you create your own level with your team, You could just, modify whatever you need, and then once you're done, you give it back to me. I'll refactor it, I'll put it back into the main program here, so they'll all be synced and they'll all be working. Okay? And if you have any questions how to do certain things, just let me know, and I'll help you as much as I can.